I'm Ryan from ExtremeTerrain.com, and in this video we're going to talk about how to hook up auxiliary accessories to the factory auxiliary switches that you can get as part of an option package in your 2018 JL. Before we get into the details, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way you can check out more videos about the JL as well as all the other products that we offer on the site. So let's jump into it. So we had a question on Instagram about how to get accessories tied into the auxiliary switch panel that's available on the JL, so we thought we'd take this opportunity to show you guys exactly how to get that done. So the switch panel I'm talking about is right down here. It's an auxiliary switch panel that gives you 4 switches built right into the JL. So in generations of the past, if you wanted to hook up lights, compressors, lockers, an air horn, anything, you would need to add switches to the Jeep. So you were either drilling into some of the trim or adding a switch panel up on the A-pillar or somewhere else in the vehicle. So what Jeep decided to do is, as part of an option package, give you these switches here, and they are going to be fused. They're also going to have relays built into them and just give you the ends of the wires that you can tie onto. So you're going to have 4 circuits total here that you're going to be able to tie into those 4 circuits either underneath the dashboard on the passenger side here for anything that you would need to power on the interior of the Jeep, like any sort of additional auxiliary lights on the inside. If you did have a compressor that mounts on the inside of the vehicle, or solenoids for air lockers, anything that you want on the inside, you can tie in there. And then you have the same circuits, just another leg to be able to tie into on the outside of the Jeep underneath the hood. So that's going to be for all of your outside stuff, your accessory lights, anything that you would want to put on the outside of the vehicle. So these switches are available, as I said, inside of an option package, and that package is the Trailer Tow and HD electrical package. So what you're going to get with that are things like a Class 2 2-inch receiver on the back of the Jeep for towing, a 4 and 7 pin electrical connector for your trailer wiring. You're going to get a larger alternator, also a larger amperage battery, but this is going to be the piece that you're really going to see on the inside of the Jeep, this switch panel. So the way this works, again, is very, very simple. They have the wires on the inside, they have them under the hood. We're going to show you how to tie auxiliary accessories into that, and then you can actually program how that switch operates directly through the Uconnect screen. So let's hop on the outside. I'll show you how to actually get the wiring done, then we'll come back inside, show you how to get everything hooked up on the Uconnect screen and actually test our lights out. So like I said, in the Jeep, there's 2 different places that you can attach to the leads that are provided for you for those 4 different switches. One is underneath the dash, but I think the one most of you are going to be using is underneath the engine bay here, because I think a lot of you are going to be using those switches for things like lights, which are obviously on the outside of the Jeep. So the wires are very neatly bundled and tied up from the factory right here between the battery and the inside of the fender on the passenger side. So what we're going to do is just cut that little piece of tape that Jeep puts there from the factory to keep these wires from getting tangled up, and then cut the sheathing off of it to expose the wires. So this is what the wires look like. This is what you're going to be looking for under your engine bay, and as you can see, they're all taped up very neatly from Jeep. So we're going to just cut a little bit of that off so we can actually see the wires themselves. So once you get the sheathing stripped back, you can actually see the 4 different wires. And what you have is auxiliary switch 1 and 2, which are the beige and green wires respectively. And they're going to be a little bit of a thicker wire. Those are 40 amp circuits, so they're going to be for things that need a little bit more power, like your compressors, maybe your winch. If you wanted to have an additional shutoff for that, you would use a larger gauge circuit for that. And then you're going to have your orange and dark blue wires, auxiliary 3 and 4 respectively, and those are going to be 15 amp circuits, so they're going to be a little bit smaller. Those are going to be more than enough for your lighting and smaller accessories. So let's go ahead and grab some lights, and we'll show you how to get those hooked up to these wires. So out of the box, your lights are really going to fall into one of 2 categories. You're either going to have something like this Raxium 7.5-inch double row LED light bar, where you just have a 2-wire pigtail on it. There isn't going to be any sort of wiring harness or anything, and it might be a little bit more apparent to you how you would get something like this hooked up to the wires that we have here. The other way that you're going to find things out of the box is something like this KC Slim Light. This is a spread pattern Slim Light from KC, and this comes with a weatherproof connector right on the end of the light, and it comes with a wiring harness that accepts that connector. So this harness has things like a fuse and a relay built right into it, and you might be wondering, can I still use my auxiliary switches with something like this? And the answer is absolutely yes, you can. The way that this is designed is so that these 3 wires here, as part of the KC wiring harness, plug directly into the switch that KC provides you with. What you would do is, instead of plugging these into that switch, you could simply connect them to your factory auxiliary switch wiring to make things work. Now, on this KC harness, you actually have 3 total wires because this does have a lighted switch, so you need that 3rd wire. What you would really be looking at here would be just grounding the ground and connecting the hot wire to your auxiliary switch wiring harness. So what we're going to be connecting up today is this smaller light bar, just because it's a little bit simpler, a little bit more straightforward to use as an example. So like I said, we're going to be using this light here, this Raxium light bar that has these 2 wires. Of course, if you were actually doing this and it wasn't just an example, you would mount your light first, figure out exactly where you need that to be, and you would extend these wires so that you could run them all the way up to this area to make your connections for your switch panel without them getting anywhere near anything that's hot or anything that's moving. So what we're going to do is actually use this circuit here, which is auxiliary number 3, and the reason we're doing that is it is a 15 amp circuit, and that's all we need for this little light here. We certainly don't need the larger gauge 40 amp, so we're going to go with that one. And we have a couple of tools here, a set of wire strippers, wire cutters, some connectors here, also some electrical tape, and a small socket, and I'm going to show you why we need that in just a second. So what we're going to start with is just clipping off this little protective piece that comes on the wire from the factory. That's just so this doesn't short up against anything if you were to lean on the switches on the inside of the Jeep without anything connected here. So it's real simple to just go ahead and snip that off. What I'm going to do now is just cut back this sheathing just a little bit more to give myself a little more room to work here. All right, so we have our wire exposed. What we're gonna do is strip a little bit of the insulation off the end of that wire so that we can get a crimp put on that. So we have exposed our copper there. We'll put our butt splice directly over top and crimp that into place. We'll use the crimping part of our stripping tool here to do that. So that's the only connection we're going to be making onto this harness here. So of course we can go ahead and heat this up. We could heat shrink the end of our connector. We can tape everything else up out of the way, make it nice and neat. The other end of the connection is of course to your light itself. Now LED lights are polarized, meaning that you have to connect the positive to the positive side and the ground to the ground side. So the red is going to be our positive. That's going to get connected right here. So we'll go ahead and do the same thing, strip that to just expose a little bit more wire. Push that right into the other end of our butt splice and crimp it all together. And again, we can heat shrink that, we can tape everything up, make it nice. So now the only other connection that we need to make is on the other side of our wire here, and that's going to be to the ground. So up here in this area of the Jeep, you have a lot of different grounds to choose from. You can really use any of them that you decide. So first things first, we'll go ahead and expose a little bit more of that wire as well. And we're going to crimp on this eyelet here. So we can put that under one of those many grounding points. Like that. Same situation here, heat shrink, tape, clean everything up. And then we have a 10mm socket. We're going to go ahead and loosen up this nut here from the factory. Go ahead and put our eyelet on the stud and tighten down the nut. And that's really all you have to do. You'll ground your light directly to the body, and you can do that really anywhere, and you'll connect the 12-volt hot side of your light to whichever circuit you want to use in your auxiliary wiring harness. So after that, we just have to pop inside the Jeep, and select how we want that switch to operate through the Uconnect system. So now that we got all of the wiring hooked up, what we can do is select how we want these switches to actually operate, and you do that through the Uconnect system. So we're gonna go ahead and fire everything up here. So once you have the screen turned on, you can go into your settings and then aux switches. And here's where you'll make your selection. So again, we hooked everything up to aux 3 because that was the first 15 amp circuit. So we'll go into aux 3 options. And again, you have a few different selections that you can make in here. So you can set the type of switch between latching and momentary. And latching is probably what most of you are going to be using for lighting. And what that means is that you push the button once and it stays sending power to that wire until you press the button again. You can also select momentary. Now that would be for possibly a light that has its own sort of circuitry built into it where you only have to send power once and then it's powered through a relay, something like that maybe. Or another example I can think of is if you had an air horn, say, you would want to set your button up as momentary, so while you're pressing it, it's sending out 12 volts. When you release it, it is no longer sending out power. The other thing that you can select is whether you want battery power or ignition power. So battery power just means that anytime that button is pressed, that light, in our case, is going to come on whether the ignition is on or not. Of course, ignition means that the ignition needs to be turned on for that light to come on. When the ignition is turned off, the light will go off, and that's a good way to save your battery. So if you have a lot of lights, you have them on, you turn the Jeep off, you hop out and you go somewhere, and you have this set to battery, those lights will stay on, draining your battery. Ignition ensures that everything turns off. And when you have ignition selected, you also have the option to turn on or off your last state recall. So that would be if I have the light on, I turn the Jeep off and walk away. Of course, the light turns off in the ignition mode. When I get back in the Jeep and start it again, does that light come back on again to its last state, or does it stay off until I press the button again? That's what that third option is going to do. So you're gonna have those three options for all four of your switches so you can set them up to work exactly how you want them to. So what we're gonna do again for aux 3 is select type lashing because it is a light. We want power source to be ignition, and last recall state we're gonna turn off. That way if I have the light on, I turn the Jeep off, I get back in it and start the Jeep again, that light's not going to turn back on. That's just a preference for me for this light that we hooked up as an example. So we'll go ahead and hit the X, back out to our home screen here. And then we can reach down and hit aux 3 and turn our light on. And there we go. Everything works exactly how it should. So that's gonna do it for this video. I really like the auxiliary switch option on the JL. I think it makes it a lot cleaner and even easier to add some accessories onto your Wrangler, and I think a lot of you guys are going to get a lot of great use out of this option. Make sure you comment below and let me know exactly what you are using your auxiliary switches for on your Jeep.